What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Destination the Show. This is episode 47. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined as always by Jeremy Nygaard and producer Theo. Hanging out with you guys tonight. Jeremy, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. So
What's new?
you say joined as always, and it turns out that that's not actually true because
That's
last
true.
time
We
I
did
didn't join
replace
you.
you last week, and
Yeah, I was
Theo was
here, but I'll go away
Theo was a welcome upgrade over you.
Yeah,
But why don't you tell us where you were and what you were doing? Because you were on kind of a cool trip of the last week or so here.
yeah. So my daughter, she moves to college here in a couple weeks, and so we took one last little family vacation. We got in the vehicle and we headed out east. Stopped at the NFL Hall of Fame, Hersheytown. Stayed right outside New York City and spent a few days in New York City. Got to a Twins Mets game.
Nice.
Cooperstown on the way home, Niagara Falls, and then made it back. So we're gone for a week, and now it's back to the real world. And
Sad.
yeah, talking back talking about baseball and
Right,
and
dude.
not dealing with the heat. So it was hot here, but it was also very hot there, which was not exactly how you want to spend days when you're walking a lot. So we walked like the Brooklyn Bridge. That was pretty sweet, and saw some cool things in Manhattan, and I think I
Nice.
visited four of the five boroughs in my time there. Stayed out of the Bronx. That was the one I wasn't going to do. So
Okay.
it
Right
was
on.
fun.
Good deal, man. Well, welcome back.
Thanks.
Um, while you're away, I won 2 national championships with Wisconsin on EA college football. We have not caught up about that, and it's my turn to abandon you because I'm going on vacation this week and I'm excited. So, but I'm even more excited, dude, to talk minor league baseball with you. When was the last time we had a conversation about the Twins minor league system? It feels like absolute months and months and months ago.
Yeah, it was certainly before the draft. I feel like the 3-4 weeks leading up to the draft was
Yep.
all about the draft. So
Yep.
um, it's been fun to watch. I don't watch the minor league stuff nearly as closely as I used to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but obviously the information is way more readily available.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you probably weren't following back in the day when the only way to get an update was to get the Sunday paper, and they had like the Salt Lake City, um, team stats, individual stats, and whoever the AA team was, and I mean that was
Salt Lake City Bees, says
what
Theo.
did I say?
You said whoever the Salt Lake City team is.
Oh well, and the AA team, I don't even remember, but like that's what we did. I'd be like, wow, that guy had
That's
a good week
wild.
because I kept the paper, and then I'd compare the. And so, at 10, 12, 13 years old, whatever I was always confused why the guys that had the best stats weren't the guys moving up. Like, dude's killing AA. Um,
We've
and
come
you
a
just
long
think that,
way, dude, in information availability.
yeah, now it's like I could watch every game on my TV, and I don't, but it's just it's so crazy that, and you could tell us the exit velocity of, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that's
No,
that's
I 100%.
25 years, and we've come that far. So, um, yeah, so we can certainly talk about things. There's been some cool developments, I think,
Yeah.
over the last couple of weeks.
For sure. For sure. You're absolutely right. I'm grateful that this is the place that we're in. Before we do that, I do want to touch on some housekeeping. And I do have something that I kind of kept from you that I do have to drop here real quick. This episode is our Destination the Show 1 year anniversary, if you can
Seriously.
believe it. Yep.
So did that mean we skipped 5 weeks over the?
I guess there were some weeks we doubled up. There are some we skipped, but we are a couple of days shy of 1 year into the podcast. So I dressed up for the occasion. I'm wearing a button-down shirt to celebrate our 1 year anniversary. You are here
Wearing
looking
a
schlubby as always.
Twins Daily Touch 'em All Pub Crawl 2016 shirt.
There you go. There you go. But wanted to start with some gratitude. It was a very casual thing at the start, and I think it's turned into something that all three of us have enjoyed a ton, and really appreciate people listening and hanging out and making it worth the time and the effort and the energy. And on that note, some ways that you can support the show before we kind of preview what we're going to jump into in the next few weeks here. So you can find us on Twitter. That's at DTS_pod1. We have a YouTube channel that all of our episodes are uploaded to. That's at Destination the Show, all one word there. If you want to send us a question, pretty much if you send us or tweet us or email us a question, we're going to feature it on the show at some point or another. We really enjoy hearing from folks a lot. You can tweet us or you can send us an email. That's destinationtheshow@gmail.com. And we just appreciate anything that anyone takes the time to do in order to support the show, whether that's as simple as downloading an episode, giving us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, anything that you can do to help us grow the show. We really, really appreciate. So now that we've dispensed with all the sentimental nonsense, let's kind of preview what we're going to do here over the next couple of weeks. It is time to take a deep dive, Jeremy, into the Twins minor league system, and we wanted to do this because I guess I'm curious for your take here. Without giving you too much of a leading question, it feels like the Twins minor league system has had kind of a glow up this year, and there's been a ton of interesting development stories. Is that your take too? What's your kind of, elevator pitch of the state of the system before we start jumping into specific guys and preview what's coming up here in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think the neat thing about the system is there were some guys at the top obviously coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was kind of a muddle of players that I think everybody felt, not everybody, but a lot of people felt strongly about some people in that group. And what's been really neat is that you've had guys move into top 100s.
Yep.
That weren't necessarily guys that you had, I wouldn't say that they were not on the radar,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they've been real pleasant surprises. And you haven't had a ton of like really disappointing years or impactful injuries. So there's just been a lot of different things happening from a lot of different angles. And then you add, in my opinion, a pretty strong draft, and you're going to get to see the hitters instead of seeing a pitcher throw maybe 3 innings in the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get to see some of these hitters hit quite a bit because they're already playing. So yeah, I think that it's an up arrow, right? And what's also kind of really maybe not forgotten but neat to include is that this is for a major league team that has right now a rookie, well, not technically a rookie third baseman who's playing really well.
Mm-hmm.
Jose Miranda, who's young, who's having a really good season.
Yep.
Jeffers isn't old by any stretch of the imagination. Brooks Lee's done well. Julian's kind of regressed, right? But Larnach is looking better. Wallner's recovered, right, after a slow start. So not only do you have a minor league system where you have guys that are really starting to get close to knocking on the door,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have young guys in the system. So I think the big question is going to be from the rotation pitching.
Yep.
And where's that going to come from, and is that going to happen?
Yep. And we're gonna dig into all of that. So we're gonna hit on some quick draft notes before we jump into the Twin system, and I'll kind of preview how we're gonna go about that over the next couple of episodes before we start. But I do want to cover some draft items because the last time we spoke, the deadline to sign draft picks had not passed yet. So I actually want to start with the Brewers related question. The Brewers were not able to sign Chris Livonis, who was one of my favorite prep pitchers coming into the draft. Rumor has it, Jeremy, that he turned down an offer of over $3 million from the Brewers as their Comp B pick. The Brewers didn't sign 6 of their picks, including Livonis, including James Nunnally, who was a guy you speculated about, might have a strong committed to Virginia. So I did want to loop back to that and ask, does that change your perspective on their draft? Does it make the draft a disappointment overall? They were able to spread money around through prep players on day 3 and get a number of high upside guys, but it's hard not to feel a little bit of the luster is lost if you don't get Lavonis, who was one of your most prominent picks. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. And how that all, may have gone down is interesting, because the Brewers had a pretty strong sense of what they could offer him, and he turned it down in draft. And so they took message, and then, a handful of picks later, decided that they were going to pick him anyway.
Yep.
And so at that point, I think the number that was rumored or floated around was like 2.7 million. And so the reason they don't take him with that first pick is because you lose that slot, right? So I don't know if they were fearful that he would be drafted by somebody else. And they really, and they obviously really liked him. And so it's a gamble worth taking. You get that comp pick next year after, I'm not sure exactly how it works. It used to be the pick after, but now I think it might be the next round. And so they obviously knew that it was going to be a big question mark whether he would sign or not sign. So they did what they needed to do in day 3 and picked up some insurance guys too, because they were, what that slot was probably a little over $1 million. So
yeah, it was like 1.3 maybe 1.25.
So they were looking at a difference of 1.5 million that they knew that they had earmarked for him. And if there was an offer over 3 million, you're talking about 1.8 that they could then spread around elsewhere. And that's always kind of the debate, right? And more so maybe in the international period, is it better to get a guy for $4 million, or would it be better to get 20 guys for 200,000?
Yep.
And in this case, I think we'd all rather have Lavonis.
Yep.
But that's how these trades work, right? You have more shots at more bites at the apple, and maybe some of these guys that they were able to sign would turn out. Now, last year they were able to get all their dudes. So I think we just kind of maybe had a heightened idea of how well the Brewers could handle this draft. But not getting Lavonis and then not getting Nunnally, to me is super disappointing. I thought for sure they took Nunnally as the backup, and I think maybe he was kind of the plan, 1A or 1B, when they really had kind of that second plan too. So I don't think it ruins their draft. They would have had probably one of my top 3 favorite drafts if they got Lavonis signed. But I think they still had a pretty solid draft.
Agreed, 100%. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I do feel like the Brewers draft just feels a little bit muted without Lavonis. That double whammy of Lavonis and Message just felt so strong and so Brewersy, and would have been excited to see what you could do with both of those guys in the Brewers' excellent and capable hands when it comes to pitching development. Let's touch on the Twins quickly. They signed all of their draft picks save to 16th rounder Aiden Haw and 20th rounder Merritt Jones. Either of those guys could have signed for up to $150,000, which wouldn't have counted against the bonus pool. Neither of those guys signed, both right-handed college pitchers. And so, I don't know, my best guess, Jeremy, unless you have a different thought, was they just had a change of heart, decided to go back to college for a final year, potentially. And then a bunch of the Twins hitters debuted at Fort Myers yesterday. The only really significant one who hasn't yet is Kalen Culpepper. His signing timeline was a little bit behind everybody else's, but Derek Bender, Kyle DeBarge, Caden Kendall, Billy Amick, Kadeem Jow, Jaime Ferrer, Jay Thomason, all of them have debuted now in Fort Myers. I think everybody has a hit, and the Fort Myers offense has gone through a pretty significant glow up in the last 48 hours. I think they scored 10 runs tonight or something. So I'm curious who you think of these college hitters is going to make short work of Fort Myers potentially, and maybe get a look at Cedar Rapids before the end of the year, kind of like Luke Keschall did in the system in 2023.
I mean, I think it'd be silly to not have Culpepper when he's ready, DeBarge and Amick move right up, right? That they were playing at a level. I mean, the Culpepper and Amick for sure were playing at a level that probably is higher than low A baseball is. So it would make sense. Ferrer too, coming from Florida State, I think.
Yep.
The hard part is that you're limited how many spots you have, and so you can't just move guys up to Cedar Rapids without either cutting people or demoting people, which you don't really want to do. Obviously, I think the is a number like 180. You can have 180 domestic minor leaguers or 165. I'm not sure what that is. But you have to have some of that organizational filler and keep that there while your prospects move up. And I think all of these guys that are at Fort Myers, you want to introduce them to pro ball, keep them at the complex, get them familiar with being a professional, and then when they're ready, you send them up. And I think we'll see a handful of those guys move up, and I would guess it would be relatively quickly, right? Because the minor league season doesn't go until the end of October, like the major league season could go. I think we're basically at a month, right?
Yep,
and so
about that.
Just getting some of these guys, and I think when you can build confidence, we talked a lot about that a year ago, right? Is it better to just let them dominate and then go into the off season thinking, hey, yeah, I can do this, or is it better to make them struggle a little bit? Yep. All of these guys are coming off long college seasons. They started way before the minor league season did. So I would guess Culpepper, DeBarge, Amick would all be Colonels before the end of the season, and maybe a couple other guys too, just based on need.
Yep. Going to be fun to track, but instantly the Fort Myers offensive lineup became, just completely revamped overnight. So that's it for draft notes. We're going to move into talking through some of the guys at the top of the Twins minor league system. So here's how we're going to do this. We are not going to try and fit in an update of the whole Twins farm system in one episode. That seems overly ambitious. So we're going to spread this out over a few episodes, and we're going to start with guys towards the top of the system and kind of work our way down. And the reason that we wanted to do this, as we kind of hinted at the beginning, is, we've seen major industry outlets release their updated system or organizational talent rankings after the draft. Is typically a time when folks do that. And the most recent two have been from ESPN. That's Kylie McDaniel, and Baseball America. Both of those publications have the Twins farm system ranked in the top 5 in baseball now. Both of them also had the Twins in the kind of 10 to 15 range at the beginning of the season. And so that really speaks, Jeremy, I think, to what you're saying about how they've helped guys to kind of emerge who weren't necessarily on our radar in the same way. And so we want to take some deep dives into all of these guys and examine, how's their season going? What's going well? What's maybe not going well? How do we feel about this? Does their performance kind of match up with how people are talking about them? Because I think there is a really significant increase in interest in the Twins minor league system from some of these performances and emergences this season. So we're going to start today with the guy who's at the very top, which is Walker Jenkins. Ready to jump in?
Yeah, I see all these numbers that you have here, so I'm excited for you to explain some of these things to me.
I may have been over enthusiastic on the notes. We won't dig into all of these, but so Walker Jenkins recently promoted to high A, Cedar Rapids, right? And so I'm just going to read off some edited highlights of his numbers from Fort Myers. Now, we'll set the scene here by saying that Jenkins got one at bat in before being sidelined for about 6 weeks with a hamstring injury at Fort Myers. He came back. It was a little bit of a sluggish start for him this season, but just prior to his promotion to Cedar Rapids, I wrote a big piece at Twins Daily, which was basically the gist was if you look at his underlying numbers, they're really, really strong. And then he kind of went on a tear for a couple of weeks. But some of his numbers at low A Fort Myers, he was striking out less than 13% of the time, walking over 17% of the time. His contact percentage was 86%. That is absolutely elite. That is 16% more than average for the level. A 9.7% in zone whiff percentage, meaning he's swinging and missing at pitches in the zone just 9% of the time. The level average is 20% there. Chasing just 21% of the time. That's about 5% less than average for the level. If you wanted to nitpick with Jenkins, the one thing you could say about his performance at low A was he was hitting the ball. His like 90th percentile exit velocity was about average for the level. Average for the level was 102 miles per hour. His was 101.7. That's the one nitpick I can come up with, was that he's average at something. He's pretty like immune splits wise. Contact percentage against left-handed pitches 83%, against right-handed pitches 86%. There's no particular pitch type that he's super weak on. Not quite as good against breaking pitches, but I think that's to be expected. So that's just some of the kind of under the hood numbers on Jenkins after he heated up a little bit at Fort Myers before he was promoted. Jeremy, I'm curious, what are your thoughts are on how Jenkins has performed this season and kind of like the Goldilocks test, right? Of like, is he doing really well? Is he not doing well enough, or is it just right? I'm really curious for your thoughts, because prior to his promotion, I definitely saw some Twins fans kind of grumbling about the kind of production and the counting stats and all of that stuff not looking that impressive. So I'm curious for your take on what we've seen from him so far this season.
Yeah, and I think the way that you laid that out is really a good way to look at it, right? Because the interesting thing is that I kind of perused. I thought the same thing with his 90th percentile exit velocity, and I saw his number, and I'm like, that seems low.
Mm-hmm.
And not just the fact that it's a below average, barely below average, but low. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, slugging percentage is okay. Even the 95th or 95 plus exit velocity, that number is very much league average.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is definitely not a matter of he's beating this level. To me, it's he knows exactly what he wants to do in the batter's box, which is great. But when you have all of those numbers that look really good, I'd expect for him to be hitting the pitches he wants harder.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's not hitting the ball that's outside of the zone and weakly hitting it. He's hitting the pitches that he wants. He's doing a good job, and he's just not hitting it very hard. Which, he's young, right? And like you mentioned, he missed a lot of the season, and the sample size is still relatively small.
Yep.
But these are not numbers that to me scream he's ready for Double A. These numbers to me are, yeah, he's going to finish the year at High A. He's probably going to start next year at High A. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, depending on how they want to handle the weather and stuff. But
I agree with that, though.
I think if you would have just asked me to guess, I would have guessed that number should be, not significantly higher, but definitely higher.
Yeah. So a few things I think about that are interesting, and I have, some data and like a little bit of a working hypothesis about why that is, right? So the first thing I would point out here is that average for the level is a little bit of a different look for me when we're talking about an 18-year-old,
Sure.
because the data will show that between 18 and 21, your typical prospect is going to add 2 or 3 miles per hour to their 90th percentile exit velocity, and so we're going to see a natural increase there with age, added strength, all of that. The second thing, which we didn't really talk about in some of the surface level stuff, was was not pulling the ball a great deal at Fort Myers. And it looked like from his spray chart that he had a lot of long opposite field fly ball outs. And so one other wondering I had was, the Twins like to tap into kind of pull side batted ball events. And so I do think that's potentially another focus that's going to kind of lead him to greater offensive impact over time. But I hear you. For me, though, like everything else about the approach is indicative of someone who's kind of, you described it well, Jeremy. Like he has a plan in the box and he's able to execute that plan so well. I think Twins fans should be really, really encouraged. And we'll dig into this more later because there's a really good question that someone asked about, like, what does a guy have to do to get promoted to AAA, like Keschall, who's been crushing at AA. And I do think we've got into a little bit of a territory with smaller organizational rosters and teams being more aggressive with their top prospects, where sometimes we have slightly unrealistic expectations of how quickly a guy should move and what kind of performance they should be putting up really, really soon at a particular level. And honestly, my theory with Jenkins on some of the batted ball stuff is just like he needed like 5 or 6 weeks of playing time to get his timing down.
Right.
And I would bet if we looked at the splits from like right when he got back from the hamstring injury to right before he got promoted, that the kind of batted ball events were on the uptick.
Right. I look at that, and the number that is very, very promising and impressive is less than 10% in zone whiff with the league average of 20%. So I mean, he's hitting his pitches. The next step to me would be now hit those, swing harder. Like you sacrifice that's kind of the sacrifice that you see players make, right?
Yep.
I want to make contact, and the more I make contact, the less hard I hit the ball. And so if you swing harder, you might miss, but you might get some of that result there too. So I mean, for an 18-year-old playing his first full season of professional baseball, coming off of an injury, your hamstrings, I mean, those can linger, and that's one that you don't really, go full out because you're afraid a little bit of recurrence. So, I mean, there's some things that I kind of raise an eyebrow at, but I wouldn't really be concerned. I don't think he's put up the numbers that you got when you were both suggesting that he's a top, whatever you thought he would be at the end of the year, and I said he would probably be about the same. We haven't seen that part of Walker Jenkins yet.
Mm-hmm. Fair. I would say my like final thought is the combination he shows of like swing decisions and bat to ball skills are extremely rare, right? And so the one if that we'll throw into the mix is if his offensive impact, that is to say how hard he's impacting the ball and how consistently, continues to trend in the right direction, I think that we're going to be seeing exactly what we hoped we might from Jenkins when the Twins drafted him as one of that extremely strong top 5 in that, vaunted 2023 draft class. So at least on track, if not doing a little better than I expected for Jenkins. I should mention before we move on here, because we're going to kind of jump around, not necessarily in a particular order. We are not going to talk about Brooks Lee here or Emmanuel Rodriguez. Rodriguez is still working his way back from a persistent finger injury, which seems to be a real kind of chronic problem for him, which is a bummer because we have not seen much of him. And Brooks Lee has been at the majors for a little bit of a while now, so we chose to focus on some guys that either just got there or kind of on the cusp outside of those guys. So the next guy I want to talk about, Jeremy, is David Festa, who has now made, I want to say it's five starts at the major league level. And if we rewind to his first two, he gave up a lot of 4 starts, 5 outings, thanks to because he came in after Okert opened against the Phillies. That's right. If we go back to his first 2 starts, things didn't go that well. If we look at his last 3 appearances, 14.1 innings pitched. He's given up 3 earned runs, walked 5 guys, and struck out 22. What are your thoughts on Festa? And my question is also, like, he's taken Chris Paddock's spot in the rotation. Do you think he's an upgrade on Paddock, Jeremy?
I saw that question. I'm like, God, that's a good question, because I think his upside is significantly higher. Right. Paddock's got the injury thing. I think with Festa, you're always kind of rolling the dice because he's a young pitcher. So if things don't go well, they can really unravel in a hurry. I think that question though is kind of going to be moot, because I think Paddock's going to have to come back and take Ryan's spot in the rotation here. As he's dealing with some arm stuff. But yeah, I think I would rather have Festa in the rotation for the rest of the year than Paddock. How that really is looked at from a pitch or an innings limit perspective, I think kind of remains to be seen. But his last outing, I mean, and they're going to treat him with kid gloves, right? He's not going to go through that order a third time. He's not going to throw 112 pitches. But I think the way that he pitched earlier this week was a really good indication that, yep, he can, at his worst, he can be, and maybe that's not the right way to frame this, but he can be a back of the rotation guy right now.
Yep.
With the chance to be more, and he fits well in the rotation. He's getting swing and misses, and with Olber pitching the way he's pitching, and Lopez hopefully getting back to Lopez, he can be the type of player that I don't know that you're going to have to lean on him to make a playoff start, right? And that's kind of the big thing. I don't know that I would feel comfortable with him in that role right now, but he certainly has a couple months to change my mind. And as a long relief or high leverage guy, potentially in a short series, I think he'd be great. So if push came to shove and they had 6 guys for 5 spots, I think Festa would be the better option, but I also think that he would be the better option to come out of the pen too, right? Because his stuff's just a little more electric. So will we see that kind of consistency? I don't think you can ever expect that with a young pitcher not named Paul Skeens. It's just not going to be. He's going to have clunkers, just like Woods Richardson had a couple clunkers. But man, Festa has rebounded really quickly, and it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I have a little Festa rant to go on real quick before we move on here. But I agree with everything you said. I thought that was spot on.
Timestamp this one so we can cut this.
Just 2 quick additional pieces of data here. Festa's fastball averaging 18.4 inches of induced vertical break since making his major league debut. 30.9 chase percentage. Really, really strong. He's getting plenty of swing and miss, and that was after 2 not great starts from the jump. I'm just sick of people writing off prospects after they've been here for 5 minutes, right? Like, we had 2 starts of Festa, which didn't really go well, but there were indicators there that like there were some nerves. The command wasn't very good. He gave up all of his kind of hard contact back to back to back. And it's frustrating to listen to people say, "Oh, he's not ready. Like he doesn't have it. He can't do it." People need time to adjust, and I wish we could operate with a little more patience when we're seeing young guys get an opportunity at the big league level. Like this is really, really hard. It's as hard as it gets. And in those last 3 appearances we talked about, where Fest has been really good, he's gone up against the Phillies, the Mets, and the Cubs. That's a really great team, a pretty good team, and a not very good team. And he has looked really, really strong. And I agree, Jeremy, to your point. Like at the moment, he's going to sit at the back end of the rotation. He's going to get the Simeon Woods Richardson treatment, which is like anytime you get into some trouble after the 4th inning, you're probably going to get a relatively quick hook. But he absolutely has the tools to thrive. And I wish we could just operate with a modicum of patience with young players who are adjusting to the major leagues for the first time.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always some names that pop up, but I think the one name, and not that they're similar body types, similar pitchers at all, but Tarek Skubal was not good for Detroit.
Yeah.
He debuted at 23, Festa's 24. Skubal went 1-4, and his ERA plus his first year was 81, second year was 98. I mean, he was a below average pitcher who looked not very good. He did strike some guys out. And now as a 27-year-old,
he's going to be a Cy Young winner.
He looks like one of the best pitchers in the league.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of, and I think some of it is, how getting comfortable with your catcher, right? Getting comfortable with the defense behind you, getting comfortable pitching in really, really big baseball stadiums. Like these are different. This is not Pullman Field in Beloit, right?
Yeah.
This is the big time. So I think there's certainly ceiling here. In the minors, Festa threw 264 innings over the course of 4 seasons, and broke 100 innings a couple times. So I think that there's the ability to be something more. And if it's a mid-rotation guy, you need those guys. And so I think, right now, what's his strikeout rate? 11.1 per 9 in the major league level. You take that. And 2.2 walks, which I would anticipate that going up a little bit. But he made some really good pitches the other day in counts that would have been easy to lose guys. And it's we'll take that. So I jokingly sent a Cy-Festa text after that outing, because he looked like a big league pitcher, and he looked like a really good one.
To me, you can see Festa making the improvements and the adjustments start to start. Like the command in that start against the Cubs was just so significantly better on all 3 pitches, and that is a big deal for him because he has limited repertoire. You don't have a ton of big league guys that have a 3-pitch arsenal, and so his command is going to have to be really, really good. When he missed against the Cubs, he was missing outside or down or up, not over the heart of the plate, and it was a big deal for him. But I do think like the upside here is a guy who can start a playoff game. We saw flashes of that against the Cubs. We also talked about, prior to the draft when we're last digging into the minor league stuff, Festa is going to be a high variance dude. He can give up hard contact. He can get into little patches where he's struggling to throw strikes or he's walking a ton of guys. And so I think you're absolutely right, Jeremy. Like there's going to be a clunker or two, but let's give people a minute, please.
Sure.
Okay. Next guy I want to talk is to your point about guys emerging, Jeremy. We got to talk about Zebby Matthews. I think there's really 2. Well, it's not really 2. There's more than 2. But he is the first pitcher this year to really, really pop in the Twin system. Hard to believe, but he started the year at Cedar Rapids. I had to double check. I had to fact check myself on that. Started the year at Cedar Rapids. He's now up in AAA. Theo has a great piece up at Twins Daily on Zebby Matthews and his kind of rise throughout the minor league season. So you should absolutely check that out. It's an interview with and comments from Jonas Levin, former guest of the show. So go give that a look. But here's Zebby Matthews start, Jeremy, at St. Paul, and I think it's 3 starts, 14 innings pitched. He's given up 11 earned runs, hasn't walked anyone, to absolutely nobody's surprise, and has struck out 18 guys. And I feel like Zebby Matthews, we're used to seeing his pitching line every single start, and it's like 6 innings, struck out 11, walked none, gave up 2 hits and 1 run. And suddenly we've seen the first speed bump almost in his minor league career, and certainly in 2024. So is his start for the Saints a cause for concern from your perspective? What do you make of it so far?
No, I think for as good as he was at Cedar Rapids in those 4 starts, as good as he was in Wichita in those 9 starts, 10 games, 55 innings, it was obvious that he was too good and push him. The thing that I want to remind people is that he's young, right? But at the same time, he's 24, which is the same age as David Festa. So I'm not overly concerned with his start. It's 14 innings, and so he's going to throw a bunch more. And he's at 92 for the year. He threw 105 last year. He threw combined like 98 the year before. So he's getting to the point now where it's like, this is kind of where your year typically ends. This is, you've kind of run to your pitch limits or your innings limits. And now you're going to push through it because we're going to need you in a greater capacity as as your career progresses. So the hits, 14 hits per 9, I can't imagine that continues, right? As far as what he's given up for home runs, 3 and 14 innings, that's not, it's a ton. It's not 0, but let's give it some time at St. Paul. I think had he, replicated his Wichita numbers at St. Paul, people would be like, call him up to start on Friday. And it's okay to hit a little bit of a speed bump and hit some resistance, because that's when really good players figure it out, make adjustments, get better. And so, he had, was it one outing though that really has kind of inflated these numbers?
Yeah, I think it was the first inning, perhaps, of his last outing. I think he gave up I want to say 4 runs in the first inning, and then he shut them, whoever the opposition was, down for like the next 4 innings and struck out like 6 or 7 guys and looked really, really good. I agree with everything you said. Do not think this is a cause for concern at all. Again, I'll go back to the same point that we made about Festa, which is let's give folks some adjustment time. It is normal for prospects to struggle when they move up a level. It is not normal for them to absolutely be dominant, like Zebby Matthews has, moving from level to level. The other thing I want to highlight a little bit with Matthews, and this is my opinion, I think we have slightly misappropriated his skill set as a pitcher, and he doesn't walk anybody, right? But it's a control over command profile for me at the moment. And what I mean by that is he throws a ton of strikes, but he's not necessarily always dotting those strikes in safe places around the zone or near the zone. And I think one of the big adjustments is going to be for him to help him get to the next level and become a really successful major league pitcher is, can you live out of the zone a little bit more? And can you make sure you're not catching as much of the zone when you're working to get ahead and get in leverage counts? And I think that's where he's seen some of his damage early at AAA, and that's what the scouting report on him is going to be, right? It's going to be he throws a ton of strikes. If you see something you can hit in the zone, go after it. And I think that's going to be what the adjustment's going to be for him over the last month or so of the season. His strikeouts are consistent. He's still not walking anybody. It's a 5-pitch mix. I think we've fallen into a little bit of unreasonable expectations if we say that this is a cause for concern and he just needs a little bit of time to figure it out.
But I mean, even if he doesn't have a great end of his AAA season, right? So not like he has these last handful of starts, but you know, he's an average AAA pitcher. He's going to come in next year, definitely be in that rotation, and probably be 7th, maybe 6th.
He's Festa next year, right? Like
he's the next man up, and
yep.
And I think with Woods Richardson being a great surprise, I don't think anybody anticipated that he would take Varland's spot and then just not give it back, right? That you need that depth. You need guys 6 through 9, and they almost have to be homegrown. And so Matthews is going to fit into that role next year, and it's going to be great. And you talked about that draft. There might be some other guys that join him in that pecking order. So
yes, sir.
Yeah. When you start out and strike out, was it 60? What do you have? 60 something before you walk anybody?
Yeah.
It creates national
62
attention.
says the ridiculous.
It creates this idea. And if you would have walked 9 guys, no one's talking about it, right?
Yep.
He's flying a little more under the radar.
Yep.
But yeah, if I get to AAA and I'm like, dude doesn't walk anybody, I'm going out there and I'm going to swing at the first pitch fastball that he's throwing, and I'm going to hit it hard because these guys are better hitters, right?
Yep.
But yeah, he's definitely going to be in the mix next year.
Yep.
And the part that I like about Matthews is 6'5", 225, but I think he's more than 225. He's a big, burly dude.
Yeah.
And
he
that's
can handle the workload.
You plug in there and you say, hey, you got 32 starts.
Yep.
In 5 days, let's roll. And so, yeah, I'm glad he goes by Zebby and not Daniel.
Yeah, it's much more fun for sure. It's a great baseball name. Yeah,
Zebulon is what he should go by. But.
Fully confident in Zebby Matthews after some AAA adjustments. Let's all give it a minute there. And you alluded to Andrew Morris, who we don't even have time to dig into on this show. But I was going to say Zebby Matthews is the kind of pop-up pitching prospect this year, but you cannot leave Andrew Morris out of that conversation. So we'll dig into him more next week. The last guy, though, I want to talk to you about, Jeremy, before we knock out a couple of listener questions, get out of here, is I think like the hitting version of Zebby Matthews, right? Which is to say one guy who's really popped, who was not on everyone's radar last year, specifically in his case, because he was a 2023 draftee, and like Zebby Matthews is now pretty much a consensus top 100 prospect in baseball. His rankings have been anywhere from like in the 40 to 75 range on most lists where he features, and that is, of course, Luke Keschall, who has just put together an absolutely stellar 2024. Here's some of his numbers on the year, and I pulled these a couple of days ago, so it's not completely up to date. He's hitting 307, 425, 482. His 14 home runs, 36 extra base hits, 62 walks, and 80 strikeouts, 23 stolen bases. So that's good for a 17.5 strikeout percentage, which is tremendous. 13.6 walk percentage, also tremendous. 80.4 contact percentage. So really good bat to ball skills there as well. So in Keschall, we have this guy who has a really good approach, good bat to ball skills, a little bit of power, extra base impact. Should Luke Keschall be in AAA, Jeremy?
No. And you know, like we talked about with the numbers earlier, if you move him up to AAA, there's just not as many. There's not spots, and right now Correa's hurt, Farmer's hurt, Austin Martin's up. You start getting these guys back, and guys are going to get sent down, and then what you don't want is for Luke Keschall to be not playing or for Eddie Julian to be not playing. And so keep him at AA for the rest of the year. The Twins, even in their wildest dreams, probably didn't say, didn't sit around the table this spring and say, hey, guys,
Yeah.
Luke Keschall's going to be a top 40 prospect.
Yeah.
So let's plan for that. But now they're in that position where it's like, man, we have him who's playing mostly looks like second base, outfield, and first base, right? That they'll find a spot for him, and they love guys that have some flexibility, and he'll continue to have that. But at this point, I mean, 56 games, 838 OPS in AA. Walk 32 times, strike out 51 times. He's striking out more at AA. Like, let's give him time. He's 21, right? He's still a puppy. So, I think we roll with him at Wichita, and if he's at St. Paul at 22 next year, he's ready to go.
Tremendous.
And there's so many infield types
that
the Twins will have. I mean, and that can be a whole different episode. Correa's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Lewis isn't going anywhere.
Lee.
You have Lee, Julian at second. They're not both going to play second. They can't, right? Santana's been great.
Really good.
He's obviously not going to be there, but I feel like
Miranda first.
Well, you got to give Kirilloff another shot.
Nope.
I do.
No.
I would. And then you have there's so many options.
Yep.
And that's why it's like I wouldn't even bother moving them up because it doesn't make sense to me.
And so real quick before I ask you, well, you kind of answered the question, but I do want to touch on a question that Josiah asked, and it was basically the gist, right? Was like, what does a guy have to do to move from AA to AAA? And he cited Erod, got off to the scorching start, didn't get moved up. Keschall has been exceptional for nearly 60 games and nothing. And I think it's a couple of things. And I think the biggest factor is what you pointed out, which is there's not spots. And they want to keep guys playing every day. I also think we exist in this slightly weird moment in what we expect of prospect promotions, and we're in the middle of a little bit of a shift in that. And that's caused by smaller organizational rosters. It's also caused by things like the PPI incentive, which makes organizations be more aggressive with their top guys. And so it started to shift us towards this almost like bias of we expect guys to move up levels really, really quickly. It's not that many years ago that most of your guys would spend most of a year at one level.
Right.
And so seeing Keschall now, however many games he's into at AA, what do you say, 60 games or something like that? That's just 56 games. I mean, that's not even half a season. And so I think that's not really a surprise, but I think the biggest factor in Josiah's question is ultimately like organizational space and where are you going to move, who's leaving for him to go to St. Paul.
Right. And bingo. So when you're at the later draft, right, is a real thing. So when you're this late in the season, the season ends in September, early September. If you're going to make a spot for him in AAA at this point in time, you're going to have to probably release somebody.
Yep.
And at AAA, maybe it's a little bit less of a big deal because a lot of those guys are minor league free agents who are going to go into free agency. But if I was running a minor league system and I could choose between keeping him at AA and keeping that guy that I can bring back at spring training, maybe he's improved, like him versus whoever. I would just want to keep that guy around and see him, right? And I think that's exactly what you do. But the late season or the late draft, the late signing season is a big deal because you don't want to overdo these college guys who've played a full season too. So, I just think he's got to stay there. The other thing that I've heard, I don't know if it was a player. I feel like I heard this from a player a long time ago that the Twins organization, it's changed since then as far as who makes these calls. But what they want to do is they want to see you have success, and then when you flip the schedule over and see that team a second time, that's when they start to consider promotions. Now, a guy like Zebby, who just was unreal, they didn't make him do that twice, but it's like if they want to be able to discern between a guy having a hot streak and a guy that's just able to get it done. And I'm not sure how many seasons or how many different teams they play. Obviously, in AAA now there's the 6-game series, so he's played 9 of them. But I'm guessing he hasn't seen a lot of teams multiple times, and that's kind of the litmus test, and if they want to move these guys up to the next level.
Interesting. I like that. Yeah, agree 100%. And so let's quickly just recap before we get this last question. We kind of folded Josiah's into that conversation around Keschall there. So, top of the system, if we move Brooksley and Erod to the side for either, Lee in MLB, Erod injured. You've got Jenkins, who's just been promoted to Cedar Rapids. Tons and tons of things to be excited about with his underlying metrics. Kind of a consensus top 15, top 10 prospect of baseball. David Festa, 13th round pick to top 100 prospect now, part of the major league rotation, 3 promising starts in a row. Zebby Matthews, gone from 8th round pick to top 100 prospect in AAA, moved up 3 levels this year. And then Luke Keschall, 2023 second round draft pick to top 100 prospect, currently performing extremely well at AA. Just as a final thought, Jeremy, like, it would be hard to envision anything better than that for these guys coming into 2024. I mean, if you're the Twins, you have to be thrilled about this outcome for this kind of cluster of guys, no?
Yeah, 100%. And that's why it's been recognized by Baseball America and ESPN that this, because you've had guys move into the top 100, and you wonder too, God, if Lewis was healthy, if Erod was healthy, like Corey Lewis, not Royce Lewis, and the guy that we haven't talked about that we can talk more about, but just as a tease, like Connor Prelip's back.
Yeah, he is. Dude, I'm so excited to dig into all these guys. It's going to be so fun. Connor, that's a great tease for next week. Last thing I want to dig into quick, because I thought this was a fun question. Ask Etchem on Twitter says, is Payton Eles a feel-good story or a legit prospect? And I love this question because it gives us a chance to give a guy a little shine who is just not being talked about enough. And I think it also highlights a way that the Twins do a really good job of adding value on the margins, on the fringes. So Payton Eles is a prospect who's currently at St. Paul. And we're going to get Theo on in just a second here to talk about his perspective on him, because he sees him play almost every day when the Saints are at home. But the Saints signed him out of indie ball. He played his college ball at Coastal Carolina, which, if you're not super into college baseball, sounds like a small school, but is an extremely good and successful program. I'm 24 years old. He's a short king. He's 5'5", 180. He's played at 3 levels this year, but his numbers are remarkably consistent across those levels. I looked them up in prep for this because I enjoyed the question. He's hitting 309, 446, 485 across 3 levels of minor league baseball. And Eles is interesting. Like, we see a lot of organizations that won't kind of invest in smaller statured players like him. If you're going to be a smaller guy who's this small, you need to have a really strong supplementary skill set offensively to make an impact, right? And he has some of those things. He's striking out under 14% of the time. He's walking close to 16% of the time. He has an 85% contact rate, a 12.6% end zone whiff at AAA. That's all at AAA. And so that approach is really, really strong. That's not striking out, walking a ton, really good bat to ball skills and not really missing anything. It's a 367 x WOBA. Here's the ding. 90th percentile exit velocity for Eles is 99.4 miles per hour. The average at AAA is 103.3. So that puts him, if he was qualified, which he's not, that would put him in like the 5th percentile for AAA hitters. And so the question is going to be, can he provide enough offensive impact when he doesn't hit the ball that hard? The first kind of box, in my opinion, that you have to check there is, does he have a really good approach and really good bat to ball skills? And the answer there is yes. So we're going to have to wait and see, but the how hard he hits the ball is something that's going to limit potentially his offensive impact. But let's get Theo on here because he's seen Payton Eles play a bunch, and would love to hear your thoughts on Eles, dude.
All right, so just to clarify real quick, we'll start with the height thing because the Saints official roster has him listed at 5'7". So I would safely say, from what I've seen, we'll go with the Jose Altuve 5'6".
Okay, there we go.
It's the meet in the middle. But no, he had the game-winning hit earlier today. The Saints played a day game, and he's just going to be one of those sneaky hitters who's going to get those laced RBI singles in. And his defense is probably where he needs to work on the most because I know there are a few balls he was really close to playing at second base earlier today. He really could have dived to and maybe had a chance in it. So I think that's where they'll have to develop things. But at the same time, as you mentioned, I mean, this guy was not in minor league baseball when the season started, and now look where he's at. So if nothing else, he's definitely going to be someone who's filling the positions at AAA next season. And he's not even turning 25 until November. So he's in an extremely good place for himself within the organization. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be with the Twins organization going into 2025. And we'll just see where he goes from there. So I think he's at a great spot. There might be a cold streak down the last 7 weeks here with the Saints, but we'll see where he goes. He's definitely not going to be leaving the Saints unless it's any injuries that really shorten his season compared to where they're at. So I think everything you touched on has been good, and I can really clarify to the eye test that it's there.
Right on. There you have it. First-hand accounting. Yeah, Payton Eles.
Can I just answer the question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's a feel-good story right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But he's performed well enough that he's putting himself at least into when he was signed, he was an organizational prospect.
Yep.
He was filler, and then it was like, oh man, this guy's too good for Fort Myers. Let's bump him. And then it was like, oh, he's been really good at Wichita. Let's bump him.
Yep.
And when you continue to hold your own at some point, then it's like, hey, what do we got here?
Yep.
And it's not the Luke Keschall level, right? But there's levels to this where, yeah, he's worked himself into, I would think, right, without having anybody tell me this, into their plans where, yeah, we're going to have him next year, and he's going to be able to fill a role in a really crowded infield in St. Paul, because that's what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the infield's not too crowded because they put Junior Severino out in right field the last 2 days because that is their creative way of saying, hey, if we want to get him up to the major league roster in September, because he's on the 40-man, so you can get him up there for a couple of games to make his MLB debut and kind of be versatile in the outfield. I mean, I don't know if Junior Severino's the right fielder from what I've seen, but they're getting creative with
Sano
it.
Wasn't either, my man, but he did it.
I mean, Severino's better than Miguel Sano. I'll say that.
There it is. You can do it right field.
Oh Lord.
But who else played in the infield today?
They got Diego Castillo. Michael Hellman's still injured, but he's definitely there. Rylan Bannon, who they got from the Mets right after the All-Star break. You got Julian. You've got so many guys, but that's the thing. They shuffle around so many people. Deshaun Kersey Jr. has been really their only full-time outfielder this entire season. I mean, Tony Kemp was playing games in center field, and Tony Kemp was not a center fielder at this point in his career, but that's just AAA baseball. So Eles, I would not be surprised if there's a game I'm there before the season's over and he's in left or right field. That's just how things are done at the AAA level, but that's not going to translate to the major league level. So I think my curious thing is, obviously, he's going to finish the season in St. Paul. I think it's safe to say as long as things continue to go as they are for him, he'll start the season there next year. I'm just curious to see if he is going to be cracking into our top prospect rankings this winter in that 25 to 40 range.
We'll see.
Yeah, when you say 25, I say no. You say 40, I say yeah, maybe. But I mean,
even if he's making the back end of the list, so
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying 25 at highest, depending how these last 7 weeks go at AAA for him.
That's fair. That's fair, but certainly, I think a really great question, a fun question, someone who deserves some shine was like we mentioned, right? He was in indie ball. This is someone who's become an organizational contributor. Keep an eye on how he's doing at St. Paul. You never know. We will call it a day for today there, guys. So today we dug into some of the guys at the top of the system. We're going to kind of work our way down and continue on to this Twins system deep dive in our next episode. Keep the questions coming. Keep the interactions coming. You guys make it really, really fun. Until then, enjoy the baseball. We'll catch you next time.